It's time to talk about romance. Yay! Some time ago, I got a suggestion from subscriber CJ Feed the Dogs to make a list about the top 10 couples in video games. However, I'm going to take that one step further and cover just one genre of video games. A genre that generally does not have time to fit relationships into the main plot. Fighting games. For the most part, the story of a fighting game has to set up why character A is fighting character B and maybe some tournament of martial arts. But when you look into the lore of some of your favorite fighting games, there is some lesser known romance going on behind the select screen. So how many lovers' quarrels have you accidentally created when playing against your friends? Let's look into it. And of course, I'll only count characters that originated in fighting games. The other two rules are at least one of the characters in the couple has to be playable, preferably both of them, but still, if there's an NPC that is significant enough in the couple, I'll allow it. And the couples on the list must be canon in the series. No, they might be a couple or they might look good together scenarios. I'm looking directly at the official lore. So let's dive into the top 10 couples in fighting games. Number 10. Kyo and Yuki from King of Fighters. Kyo is the protagonist of King of Fighters. He started off as a high schooler and saw more character development as the series progressed. However, because he is still a high schooler, he has a standard high school relationship with his normal girlfriend Yuki. Nothing against Yuki, she seems like a nice girl, it's just that you're in a game with assassins that can fight with energy from pure hatred or schoolgirls that have descended from a goddess, so Yuki does have some stiff competition. Still, Kyo, Kusanagi, and Yuki are happy together, and Kyo did risk his life with the help of his team to save her from a main villain. Sure, Yuki does not know martial arts or cannot fire a ball of energy from her hands like a certain other short-haired girl in a fighting game that always wears a schoolgirl outfit, but Yuki was playable in the SNK fighter, Gal Fighters. This was a crossover fighting game with various different female characters from SNK games. However, this was Yuki's only playable appearance in a fighting game, where she showed she was able to keep up with characters like Mai Shiranui and sword fighter Nako Ruru. So maybe I don't give her enough credit and Kyo really does see something special in her. Number 9. Ken and Eliza Masters. For the most iconic fighting game franchise in history, you don't really have both members of a canon couple as playable characters. Looks like Capcom doesn't want us to make True Love participate in a fight. I mean, who do we have as potential candidates? Ryu and Chun-Li? Everyone puts them together since Capcom generally shows them as the first characters in Street Fighter games, but they stay pretty far apart from each other in the story of each game. Media outside of the game, though, there you have an argument. There's also Guy and Rose, but they just kind of look at each other and no one talks about it again. You could also say Julie and T-Hawk, since she was T-Hawk's girlfriend before she was brainwashed, but you probably didn't know this until T-Hawk's Super Street Fighter IV ending, so yeah, prominent relationship there. And before I get to the actual choice, the most controversial potential couple in M. Bison and Cammy, where Cammy's original arcade mode ending was mistranslated into English to have Bison say Cammy was his lover before she lost her memory, when he was supposed to say she was a clone of him. Still, this did not stop the USA cartoon from integrating its own version of this plotline. Now, Ken and Eliza at least have some distinction, more so than those questionable couples. In Street Fighter II, you wanted to see that arcade mode ending. You could not just look it up on the internet at the time. You have no idea what would come when you help your fighter rise up and win the tournament. While this is not the most glamorous couple, seeing them get married was our reward for defeating Bison. We get to see Eliza's hair flow in the wind as she runs toward Ken, and then stands there for a good 5 to 10 seconds with it still flowing. Little too much hair gel, I guess? If Ken never won, would Alpha have been a waste? Would he have never gotten married? He probably would have gotten married, but there would not have been as much of a celebration. Of course, they do lose points in Street Fighter IV The Ties That Bind, when Ken does not even notice that Sea Viper captured Eliza for a period of a few days. Number 8. Kazuya Mishima and Jun Kazama from Tekken. Jun represents purity. Kazuya represents pure evil. And they go together because Paula Abdul wrote a song about it. Granted, Kazuya wasn't always an evil madman, he was just a normal dude in Tekken. Then he inherited his father's company, and we learned that he could just use non-physical power to have his demands fulfilled. However, he met Jun when he was still pretty evil. Kazuya said he was attracted to Jun because she's so mysterious. Somehow they fell in love with each other, even if it was just for a small amount of time, because they did have a child together. Or Kazuya just left Jun after he found out she was pregnant. I don't know the full story behind that. How did their romantic conversations even go? I love birds and wildlife. I love death. Oh, that's nice. Number 7. Kai and Dizzy from Guilty Gear. So Dizzy is half gear, half human. Gears in Guilty Gear are magical creatures that are produced as biological weapons of war. However, due to their original intention of being used to advance the human race, being a gear or just half gear causes some side effects. Mostly extreme power that can be used for destruction and faster aging, which causes physical and mental attributes to peak out around the person's 20s, or more gear's 20s. Since Dizzy is a benevolent gear character, she does not want to be used for destruction, so Kai was able to help her control her powers, also getting a chance to learn she's not a bad person, eventually falling in love with her. You would think this would cause problems considering she's part gear and all, but overall, they're just fine. Kai is not bothered by that lizard tail. Kai and Dizzy are basically married. See? An easy-to-determine relationship unlike some other characters in other Arc System Works fighting games. You all know who you are. Number 6. Liu Kang and Katana for Mortal Kombat. Here is a couple that took forever to develop. You have the champion of Mortal Kombat, and the princess of another realm who is also a master assassin. I'm not sure if those things go hand in hand on paper, but it eventually works. We don't see any semblance of a relationship until Liu Kang's Mortal Kombat 4 arcade mode ending, where Katana told Liu Kang to come join her in Edenia, but Liu Kang deferred since he had to protect Earthrealm. Katana understood and told him goodbye for now, and as long as he doesn't get himself killed, they can be together eventually. Then in the next game, he goes and gets himself killed. The revamp of the timeline made the relationship more interesting. In Mortal Kombat 9, Katana was sent to assassinate Liu Kang, but he defeated her in a fight and refused to kill her despite the customs of Mortal Kombat. In fact, he decided to keep their fight a secret so Katana would not be punished for her failure. Later, Katana is punished for her failure. Katana just can't win. Throughout the story, you clearly see they have chemistry and respect for each other as fighters and as people. However, they both die by the end of Mortal Kombat 9. This actually shows they are inseparable since you never actually permanently die in Mortal Kombat unless you're Jade, so they exist as evil revenants in the Netherrealm. And even in death, they're still together, as evil top generals in Quan Chi and Shinnok's army, but still, how romantic. Although they do not interact too much in the story mode of Mortal Kombat X, I could assume they're still in love because of the post-credits scene that shows they have become the Emperor and Empress of the Netherrealm. I mean, Katana did have a lot of guys to choose from in the Netherrealm considering the male-to-female ratio we saw in the story mode, so I could only conclude that their love knows no boundaries, unless there are some cryptic clues to tell us otherwise. Oh, I'm sorry, I meant to say cryptic clues. Number 5. Shadow Asura and Shiki from the Samurai Showdown series. More specifically, the Samurai Showdown 64 part of the series when everything had a few more awkward polygons. Shiki first showed up as a servant of Yuga the Destroyer, but after she broke free of his villainous brainwashing, she became your normal, everyday, overly flexible ninja swordswoman. When Yuga returned, he creates his own clone of the main character Asura, to kill Shiki or something like that. The clone, known as Shadow Asura, was a mindless servant to Yuga until he met Shiki and madly fell in love with her. You should be proud of yourself, Shiki. You made a mindless clone gain emotion. That's a pretty tough feat. So in order to defeat Yuga, normal Asura and Shadow Asura had to combine into one being. and apparently Shadow Asura was more Asura than the real Asura, so the Shadow Asura Shiki meant is the prominent personality of the combined Asuras. Yeah, that's not confusing at all. They eventually had a daughter named Mikoto, who was in Samurai Shodown Warrior's Rage, being the only representative of that family. Shiki returned in SNK vs. Capcom Chaos, alone, without Asura in any form, or the daughter. I guess we know who the most important member of that family now is. Number 4. Killick and Xinghua from Soul Calibur. These two have a soap opera relationship. They are a couple and admit having love for each other, but they at times do not call themselves a couple because Killick just cannot for his own personal reasons of protecting her. While part of it is that Killick is full of angst when he's all, "Oh, gotta train more, must defeat Soul Edge," the main reason he has trouble admitting his feelings for Xinghua is because she looks like his sister. It's not exactly what it sounds like. His sister is actually his sworn sister, as in an adopted sister. Her name is Zhan Liang. If I'm pronouncing that correctly, doesn't that name sound pretty similar to somebody else's? That's right. Killick's adopted sister Zhan Liang is the biological sister of Xinghua, who Xinghua never met before, and Killick was unaware of their relation to each other. Part of the reason why they never met is Zhan Liang sacrificed herself to protect Killick in the story of Soul Calibur 1, which later influenced Killick not to have any loved ones near him, whether they be siblings or relationships. Eventually, Killick and Xinghua accept each other's love for at least a small amount of time, since between the 17-year time skip between Soul Calibur 4 and 5, we learn Xinghua was pregnant with her and Killick's child, which she learns about after Killick leaves her one night to accept his destiny in defeating evil or master all weapons or something like that. Once you get into Soul Calibur 5 territory, the story skips over so many plot points, it's more fun to just ignore them and play the game pretending like Soul Calibur 4 was the last we saw of this happy couple. So that means we could completely ignore the fact that Xinghua had an arranged marriage to some guy before Soul Calibur 5 and now has a daughter unrelated to Killick named Leisha who replaced her on the roster. And we could ignore the fact that Ziba, who is the son of Killick and Xinghua, is running around on the roster too without Killick even knowing he has a son. That would be nice to ignore. You do have one mess of a family tree right there. Number 3. Necro and Fe from Street Fighter. You think Ken and Eliza, or two playable characters, are the best power couple in Street Fighter? Well, consider Necro and Fe for that title. Yes, Fe has not been playable to date, but they had a relationship that gradually developed through each interpretation of Street Fighter 3. Necro was alone in his intros and outros in Street Fighter 3 A New Generation. In the next two versions of Street Fighter 3, Second Impact and Third Strike, Fe joins him in his intros and outros, considering the circumstances of how they met during these games. Necro was a prisoner of the main villain Gil, who was experimenting on him, which is how Necro received his powers and mutated appearance. In an arcade mode ending, he met Fe, who was also a prisoner of the main villain and was being experimented on by Gil's organization, just like Necro. They eventually fell in love, and while the game can't show it as much based on how little focus is on story in Street Fighter 3, you can understand how this happened. They both had been through the same experience. They're fighting for the same goal to be free, and they seem like their lives were terrible before they met each other. In Necro's story, we learned he initially joined Gil to seek a better life, not knowing Gil would deceive him. And on Effie's side, look at her concept art. She looks so emotionally tortured. What's that song by the Cars? You're Just What I Needed? I think this might have been the scenario for them. Together they seem legitimately happy, and the last we saw of these two was them riding off into the sunset in Necro's Third Strike arcade mode ending. I would like to see Effie as a playable character someday. She has this look of a character who has some hidden power. Of course, if that is never on the table, maybe Necro could just return and Effie join him in some of his attacks. And if that were to ever happen, maybe they would have been number 1 on this list. But for now, they can go enjoy their unique selves together. Number 2. Andi Bogard and Mai Shiranui from Fatal Fury. Andy Bogard just wants to win against his older and more popular brother Terry. Well, you know what, Andy? You've finally beaten him. Terry could have made it on this list, but no. You are the only of the Bogard brothers who is in a notable enough relationship that I feel worthy of discussion. You could have made an argument for Blue Mary and Terry Bogard, but they don't look that interesting. They seem like your standard prom king and queen, but Blue Mary has not been in a new SNK fighting game since 2007. So yeah, I'm not sure how they're doing as a couple. Andi and Mai have an interesting relationship that can exist since they've constantly been in SNK fighting games. You may not even guess they are in a relationship by the way they act, since Andi is constantly in a state of, gotta train more, and Mai is following him around the world. At first, Mai did not care for Andi since she just thought he was another stoic fighter. However, Andi gave Mai a present on her birthday once, showing he does care, and she did a complete 180 in feelings. Now she dreams of marrying him. Unfortunately for her, that's just a dream. Though she's madly in love with him, and I don't think Andi has any objections, so it still led to a serious relationship. You can tell the relationship is genuine because Andi has to listen to Mai and carry her bags, and there's nothing he can do about it. Number 1. Here we may not have everyone's favorite couple, but these are two iconic characters in fighting game history. They have an interesting relationship, and their daughter is even the future of their own fighting game franchise. Number 1. Johnny Cage and Sonya Blade for Mortal Kombat.
Quan Chi has escaped. Why are you smiling? She called me Johnny.
Johnny and Sonya are two of the most important characters in the Mortal Kombat franchise. They may not have the appeal of the Scorpion and Sub-Zero rivalry, and they may have not saved the Earth multiple times, but they've had some of the most interesting development through the Mortal Kombat games, being complete strangers who had different goals, to people who started to appreciate each other considering their situation. It may not be the most storybook ending, but it's pretty realistic. I know, that's what everyone wants in their video games, realism, but hey, this is just my opinion in the end. Mortal Kombat is probably the only video game franchise to get major plot ideas from its movie adaptation, since Johnny and Sonya first showed signs of being a couple not in the games, but in the movie. When the series revamped the timeline in Mortal Kombat 9, the only two Earthrealm warriors left at the end of the story mode were Cage and Sonya. So if Sonya said she wouldn't date Johnny even if he was the last man on Earth, I think she should reconsider now. Okay, she never actually said that. Really, they didn't do that much together outside of the very first chapter in MK9's story. MKX is the first game where we see their relationship explored in a sort of realistic fashion. In the parts of the story that focus on their relationship before or early in their marriage, you see their cracking jokes and really enjoy fighting side by side, wanting to protect each other, legitimately happy to be together. In the 25 years that pass, we learn why they grew apart. Sonya was always working alone, leaving Johnny to care for their daughter Cassie, rather than them growing apart for other reasons like disinterest in each other. When Johnny gained that green aura, which is the reason he defeated Shinnok 25 years ago, it was supposedly because a loved one, Sonya, was in peril, despite the fact he used that power in-game before that moment, but we don't talk about that. After they grew apart, you can see Johnny has a fondness for their time together, and Sonya is trying to push him out of her life, even if in reality she may still have feelings for him.
There will be no surprises from you, Mr. Cage. Bring him.
It wasn't until Johnny was captured by Shinnok in the current time where we saw Sonya actually care for Johnny again. While we can't see what Sonya would have been like if she wasn't distanced from Johnny this whole time, it could be speculated the relationship could have stayed intact. So really, they bring out the best in each other when comparing their personalities of the past and present and why they ultimately separated. Wow, that got a lot more in-depth than I expected for some fictional characters. Maybe I should write Lifetime movies or something. Anyway, that's the storybook of Sonya and Johnny.
Did we?
Yeah, we got him.
So, what are your opinions? Who are some of your favorite couples in fighting games? And if I want to open the book of endless possibilities, who do you think should be a couple in fighting games? Thank you all for watching. I'll linger here for a second if you want to click any of those annotation links, unless you're somewhere where annotations are turned off, then you'll just pause the video in sadness. Or you don't have to click anything. You can just go enjoy your morning, afternoon, evening, whatever time of the day it is for you. Anyway, see you all next time.